Sorry about that interruption. And Ozful dream continued. I'm really sorry. It was an accident, apologized Darlin one last time. As if she had not heard Darlin at all, she yelled out, This chair isn't going to move itself. Honestly, people, I should get rid of each and every one of you. The two that had just cleaned up the mess returned, accompanied by two other midgets, and slid the large chair back enough for her grandmother to sit down. Darlin watched the four struggle with the weight of the chairs as they pushed it back closer to the table. I hope you're not one of these vegetarians. We're having stuffed quail with artichoke hearts, said her grandmother in her hollow, screechy voice. Darlin said, Why no, ma'am. That sounds great. Have you talked with my mother? I haven't been able to get a hold of her. The last I heard, she was coming to pick me up after school to take me home for my birthday. You know she's a very busy woman. She always took on more than she could take. She called this morning and asked if you could come here because she was stuck in Milan and she would call tomorrow, answered Grandma. The servants wasted no time bringing out the food. There must have been step ladders on the other side of the table because the midget had no trouble at all placing the food on the table. After Grandma had finished loading her plate, Darlin filled her plate and poured herself a glass of water for it. It was the only thing to drink. Is that all you're going to eat? You know it's disturbing how much you're like your mother. She always ate like a sick little bird as well, sneered Grandmother, who by now was manhandling her quail breast. Darlin said nothing and began to eat. Throughout the rest of the meal, the two said nothing. Every so often, Darlin would look up to see if there was any chance of communication. But each time she did, her grandmother would look down at her plate. Halfway through the meal, Thurston came into the hall through the far stained glass doors. Darlin had come through. He was carrying a black leather folder in front of him like a tray. Grandma gasped, What is it now? Can't you see where I am eating with my granddaughter? Thurston began. I'm sorry, my lady. I forgot to get you to sign these acquisitions for tomorrow. Convention. He placed the folder on the table beside her and stepped back. After picking it, she began to look the pages over. Well, my pen, said Greta, still reading. Thurston responded, Oh, sorry, my lady, and pulled out a long black wooden pen about 12 inches long. She signed with authority, then gave it back to Thurston, who said nothing and left through the kitchen doors, leaving Darlin and Grandma back to their uncomfortable, silent dinner. Studying her face, Darlin could not see any resemblance to neither her or her mother. Her face was much more slender than theirs. She did not have a little button nose. Instead, she had a long, slender nose that rounded over to a point. Her cheekbones were extremely high and sunken in. However, her skin did look youthful for a woman of her age. Darlin finished first. As to not make things awkward, she kept pouring and drinking water. When Grandma finished her plate, she looked up at Darlin, then said, It was really nice to see you. We will have tea tomorrow in the garden for 3 o'clock. By then, your mother should have called, and we'll figure out what you are to do for your birthday. Darlin, very confused, said, Yes, it was very nice to see you too. I guess I will go back to my room now. I am getting kind of tired. Darlin stood up, slid her chair in, and started to walk towards the way she had come in. She got halfway across the white marble floor when she heard her grandmother cry out, What in the world are those? Darlin turned around, not knowing what she was talking about, and asked, What's what? Standing up, pushing her massive chair back with her legs, she pointed with her narrow, bony finger at Darlin's feet. Those atrocious things. Where did you get them? They make you look like some kind of harlot. Honestly, darling, to disgrace a national treasure such as Wizard of Oz and turn the ruby slippers into stilettos is absolutely shameful. You look like a stripper. Oh, come on, they're not that bad, pelted Darlin. Where on earth did you get those, and who's been putting things like this in your head, persisted the now completely irate woman. No one. I seen them in a window downtown earlier today, and I thought they were cute, explained Darlin. What window? What store? I don't know. A new one I'd never seen before on Boiler Street. But don't worry. They're one of a kind. I doubt you'll ever have to look at them again. responded Darlin as she continued on her way back to her room. The next morning, Darlin awoke, startled by the sounds of Benson's voice and arms shaking her shoulders. I'm awake, yelled Darlin the moment she figured out what was happening. Benson huffed. You were having a nightmare. Well, I'm awake now, Benson. You can let go of me, sarcastically, Darlin grunted. A quick thought came across her mind as she felt Benson's grip loosen. I wonder if Paris ever had to deal with this kind of second-rate help. As soon as Darlin rubbed the sleep out of her eyes, she felt an odd familiarity of her surroundings, in which she could not quite put her finger on. As she started to look around the room, she seemed to know where everything was, as if she'd been through the room before. Benson was now standing tall above her bed, shaking his head. With concern, Benson started, Girl, you had me scared. I had just left my room and was heading downstairs to get some photos of the grounds. When I heard you yelling, I don't know what you should be dreaming about. You kept yelling about an oil can. You shouldn't scare people like that. Okay, relax. Now tell me what I was yelling about, questioned Darlin. Benson took a deep breath, then said, You were crying and screaming in your sleep. Something about an oil can, and you kept mentioning something about a scarecrow. What? Get out of here, asked Darlin, trying to understand what was going on. Girl, you must have caught yourself in the case of castle fever. I don't think it's any of those new heels you bought, or just the spooky castle. But you be thinking you Dorothy from Wizard of Oz. By the time Benson finished telling her, he was standing on one leg with one knee up high and his hand over his face, laughing hysterically. Darlin sharply injected, I highly doubt that, and it's Dorothy, not Darcy. Okay, so I made a mistake. Let me go back. Girl, you must have caught yourself in a case of castle fever. I don't know if it's those new heels you bought or just this spooky castle, but you be thinking you Darcy from Wizard of Oz. By the time Benson finished telling her, he was standing on one leg with one knee up high and his hands over his face, laughing hysterically. Darlin sharply interjected, I highly doubt that, and it's Dorothy, not Darcy. Benson replied, barreling over, Girl, I thought Wizard of Oz was supposed to be a happy story, not a nightmare. As Darlin started to get off the bed, she noticed a few gold glitter flakes scattered across her body and bed. She wondered where they all came from, then snapped at Benson. You got glitter all over me. What are you talking about? I ain't got no glitter. Don't be blaming me for that. You know it's probably that busy dog of yours. She's always into something, that Disco, said Benson. A second later, Disco popped out from underneath the covers and barked. She too had glitter on her nose. Aw, what did you get into, Disco? Darlin asked. Darlin could not get mad at Disco. She was just too darn cute. Come here, Disco, Darlin said as she patted her lap. Disco replied with a few barks, then jumped into Darlin's arms. She was greeted with lots of hugs and kisses. While still adoring Disco, Darlin asked, Benson, what time is it? Benson rolled up his sleeve to look at his watch, still chuckling. It's about 12:30, he replied. Oh my, what time did Grandma say it was to meet her for tea? Asked Darlin. Benson replied, I believe she wanted you to get in the backgrounds near the pool for about 3 p.m. Well, I'm going to have to take a shower and order some breakfast. What were you saying you were going to do? Darlin asked. Benson replied, I'm going to take some pictures of those awesome hedges. I'll catch up with you later. Say around 2:30? Okay, Darlin responded. See you then, and don't get yourself in any trouble. Darlin got up to look for Disco's food, but could not find any. She then walked over to the fireplace and hit the intercom button. Moments later, Thurston responded, Yes, Miss Darlin, what would you like? I can't seem to find Disco's food. Do you know where they would have put it? Darlin asked. The boys are kind of busy right now, but I'll tell you what. I'll send breakfast up for you and your little dog, too. Is there anything particular you would like to eat this morning? I would like Belgian waffles with whipped cream and fresh strawberries on top. Maybe some sausages, Darlin replied. Thurston replied, I'll have the chef make something up special for you. As Darlin momentarily took one more look around the room for the dog food, she seemed to be reminded of her familiarity with the room. She opened a drawer on a buffet and already knew that it contained a couple of silver candlesticks. She must have done some sleepwalking. She had been known to sleepwalk, but not for many years. Chalking it up to nonsense, she quickly shrugged it off as more of her weird behavior she had been experiencing for the last couple of days. She closed the drawer and started to chuckle to herself about her Wizard of Oz dream she had yesterday and this morning. A few minutes later, she was lost in deep thought, but this time it was over choosing what to wear. She picked out a few articles of clothing designed by one of her favorite designers, who also happened to be a personal friend, Cleo. Cleo had just realized a new hip line of pixie wear, and Darlin had first pick before the line went to production. Darlin chose 2 skirts. One was purple, the other green. The purple skirt was long on one side and came to a point that was just above touching the floor. The other side of came to a point that just about touched the floor. The other side of the skirt was cut off at her hip level. The skirt was designed in the shape of a leaf. The green skirt was the exact same, except for it came down to only her mid-thigh. She wore one on top of each other, kind of like Tink from Peter Pan, on opposite sides. After selecting light green leggings with intricate designs of leaves, she chose a turquoise halter top that had a string to tie it up in the back. She completed her outfit with a pointed hoodie sweater that started just below her arms. It was dark purple, and the hood resembled a long pointed elf hat accentuated down to her back. Smiling now, looking at her outfit, she laid on the bed. Darlin decided to call her mother again. She still had no idea what her plans were and did not find her grandmother very helpful last night at dinner. After a voicemail came up again, Darlin slammed the phone down and began to cry. She could cry now that she was all alone. Her mother had always instilled in her that crying is for babies, and that people look down on it. It was like a sign of weakness. As Darlin cried, collapsing down on the bed, she wondered to herself whether her mom even remembered or if she would even bother to call. Gaining a little strength now, Darlin wiped her eyes dry and began to look at the old painting of her mother. After spending last night alone with her grandmother, Darlin could now see that her mother or her did not possess any of her grandmother's hideous characteristics. After thanking God for that, Darlin walked into her bathroom. The bathroom floor was warm due to the in-floor heating. The bathroom itself was completely white, even the fixtures. The only thing of any color was red antique bathtub. The old cast iron kind of clawed feet. Throughout the bathroom walls were exhaust vents, which turned the entire bathroom into a steam room. Pondering it for a minute, Darlin turned on the steam and shut the glass door. Since her food was on its way, and she was kind of hungry, she would eat breakfast while the steam built up. Her mother had always stressed the importance of steam and how it kept people youthful and healthy. Darlin recalled her last steam bath she had at her mother's house in Beverly Hills, and the trouble her and Willow got in for leaving the steam bath running with the door open. The steam soaked the entire top floor of the estate. She remembers her mom yelling and went back to make sure the glass door to the steam bath was closed. When she turned around, she could see Disco barking at the bookcase. She was sitting pretty the way she did when she wanted something from Darlin. "You're so weird, Disco. Come here, girl." Disco responded with a few barks at the bookcase and then happily met Darlin on the bed. As the two of them sat engaged in cuddles, Darlin's sadness drifted away. She had taught herself to deal with her mother's selfishness. When alone, Darlin often wished she could just be normal. Average kid with a normal average parents. If she had one wish, it would be a mother who truly loved her. She would give up all her fame and fortune associated with her grandmother's money just to have that relationship with her mother. Suddenly, there was a mild knock on the door, followed by the door opening, and a cart seemed to magically roll into the center of the room. A soft voice spoke. "Breakfast is served." As Darlin stood up from the bed, she could now see a little man who was just a few inches shorter than the cart. "Thank you, that will be all," said Darlin as she headed for the cart. The little man left the room, closing the door behind him. Smell good, eh, Disco?" she said as she lifted the cover off her breakfast. She began to tease Disco as she looked through the food, holding Disco in her arms, saying, I wonder which one is for you. You don't like sausages, do you? Hey, you don't like sausages, huh? Disco barked twice. Does Disco want some eggs and bacon? Darlin teased. Disco, barking frantically now, had made her choice. Darlin put Disco and the plate of sausages and bacon down on the floor for Disco. She then gathered the tray which contained waffles, assorted shaped fruits, pancakes, and walked on over to a small table beside the bookshelf. Explosions of flavor filled her mouth as she ate the exotic fruits. As she got up to get juice from the cart, she felt a cool breeze across her neck. When she turned to see where the breeze was coming from, she noticed in her peripheral vision a copy of the Wizard of Oz book, which looked like it must have been 100 years old. Shaking her head about the coincidences of the last couple of days, she made her way back to the cart. As she sat down with her juice, she felt the breeze again. Then noticed Disco wasn't eating, which was strange, for she loved people food. Instead, she was sitting pretty at the bookcase. Darlin coaxed, "Eat your food, Disco. It's going to get cold." Disco remained uninterested, not thinking anything much more about it if she finished her juice and got undressed and went into the steam room, leaving Disco to stare at the bookcase. By the time Darlin went into the bathroom, she could hardly see her hands when in front of her face. The steam was so hot and thick she could only last a few minutes before she had to turn on the exhaust button. Within seconds, the steam was sucked out of the bathroom and the room was returning to a more tolerable temperature. We're going to take another brief break.